In addition, they appear to be deficient in male sex hormone, and while they may be fertile, they have a lower phallic posture, due to flaccidity. Albinos usually have flabby muscles. Asterisk the San Blas are an Indian group in Panama, Central America, and reduced muscular strength is shown by manometer readings. Psychiatric examination of 6 albinos show their work to be generally in an intellectual sphere where overcompensation is the rule. Religion serves as a major support for many albinos who take a fatalistic view of life and blame their failures on their albinism, which is God's will. As the usual thing, sexual experience is much more TED in. The albinos, who until recently, were not allowed to marry. Whole albino males have the reputation of being weakly sexed. Albino females are said to be as active sexually as morenos, and they frequently have illegitimate children. It should be noted that many of the San Bias albinos were indistinguishable from Scandinavians or other Northern Europeans. The 19th century German philosopher, Arthur Schopenhauer, made the following statement about white skin, in the Philosophy of Schopenhauer, Metaphysics of Love of Sexes, which illuminates both Wittko's and Keller's findings. Illy white color of skin is not natural to man, but that by nature he has a black or brown skin, like our forefathers the Hindus, that consequently a white man has never originally sprung from the womb of nature, and that thus there is no such thing as a white race, as much as this is talked of, but every white man is a faded or bleached one. Additional support is found in the work of Dr. Cheikh Anta Diop, the highly respected Senegalese anthropologist and Egyptologist, founder of the Radiocarbon Institute of the Fundamental Institute of Black Africa, Dakar, Senegal. Dr. Diop, in an interview in the winter 1976 issue of Black Books Bulletin, stated, "There is absolutely no doubt the white race which appeared for the first time during the Upper Paleolithic, around 20,000 BC, was the product of a process depigmentation." Further, Dr. Diop informs us that much later the whites commenced their migratory movements towards the southern areas around 1500 BC. Therefore, it should not be surprising that deep within the historic and current mythology and symbolism of Western civilization and culture, white supremacy system/culture, is evidence to strongly support the above outlined mode of origin as that actually traversed by the global albino, white, collective. Major evidence for this theory of albinism, whiteness, is found in the symbolism of the Adam and Eve biblical mythology. Western civilization looks to this mythology in the book of Genesis as the account of its beginning. The essential elements of the Adam and Eve story are that Adam and Eve were in the Garden of Eden, ate the forbidden fruit, the apple, had sexual intercourse, became ashamed of their nakedness and were chased from the Garden of Eden. My decoding of that fundamental mythology and symbolism for Western civilization is as follows. Adam and Eve are TLLE symbolic figures of early albino mutants produced by black parents. TLLE Garden of Eden is Africa, the place where all knowledgeable anthropologists and paleontologists are informing us that human life began, and that the first human beings were black-skinned. The apple eaten by Adam and Eve is the presumed, orally ingested poison, looked upon as the cause of the mutation to albinism. This ingestion was followed by the act of sexual intercourse, which is also viewed as being responsible for the mutation to albinism and, therefore, the original sin. Adam and Eve's shame for their nakedness indicates their rejection and shame of their pale white bodies. Colorless or naked when compared to the black and brown-skinned normals, their use of fig leaves to cover their genitals, as they are depicted, implies the shame and rejection of their genital apparatus, including their genes. Their expulsion from the Garden of Eden represents the isolation of TLLE albino mutants away from the skin-pigmented normals until their voluntary or involuntary migration out of Africa, northward into Europe. Western culture goes funher in the symbolism of its religious philosophy to pinpoint the eating of TLLE apple by Adam and Eve, followed by their act of sexual intercourse, as the act of original sin. Because of this act, Western culture conceives of all its people as being born in sin and in need of being born again. Similarly, there are several other biblical references to skin color change through God's punishment and leprosy, wherein the skin is described as becoming white as snow, 2 Kings 5:27. Of course, the further implication is that the skin originally must have been black, meaning melanin pigmented. Otherwise, how could it turn white? Numbers 12:10 states, "And the cloud departed from off the tabernacle, and, behold, Miriam became leprous, white as snow, and Aaron looked upon Miriam, and behold, she was leprous. And Aaron said unto Moses, Alas, my Lord, I beseech thee, lay not the sin upon us, wherein we have done foolishly and wherein we have sinned." Contrary to this Western philosophy, there are no accounts of skin pigment peoples, in their basic religious and or philosophical texts, conceive of themselves as being born in sin or viewing their genital apparatus, and therefore their genes, as the basis of sin and evil. Further, Stern civilization's religious and secular philosophy pinoms the act VLTY of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden as the point of the FLL of M. The fall is the symbolic expression for the genetic mutation to beamism and the negative projections regarding the white skin self a global population where the norm was black or brown skin color. Likewise, today, the modern science of genetics views most spontaneous mutations as negative and deleterious in terms of the welfare of the organism and the environment, at least in the human population. Additional symbolism in Western civilization and culture lends further upper to this thesis. For example, the dog rather than God proverbially is considered Western man's best friend. This is contrary to the beliefs of SKM pigmented peoples regarding their relationship to God. This Western concept of the dog as man's best friend is linked to the mythology of the founding of Rome. According to this mythology, Rome was founded by two orphans, Romulus and Remus, who were suckled by a wolf. Both the wolf and the dog are canines. These two presumably HTI fans are said to have founded the state that began Western civilization and culture. When this is decoded, Romulus and Remus are the symbolic representatives of the early albinos who were abandoned by their black mothers in Africa as genetic mutant defectives and in the process of their northward migration for survival, were left to dogs suckled by wolves. This decoding explains the worship and love of the dog, canine, in Western civilization. Western man's affection for the dog is reflected in the fact that in 1978 New York City, dogs were permitted to put 250,000 pounds of fecal matter on the streets each day, defiling the environment for human beings. And, is this love and worship of the dog reflected in the mirror image of the words God and dog even at this advanced stage in the expression and evolution of Western civilization and culture? Further, as relationships among people become more alienated, Western peoples and those non-white peoples who have been influenced most heavily by Western culture are gaining more satisfaction from feeding, clothing, loving and kissing canines than in feeding, clothing, loving and kissing human beings. Western civilization's original symbolized relationship to the canine, following the African, black, Mother's rejection of the albino mutant offsprings undoubtedly has influenced the frequent use of the cursing expressions bitch and son of a bitch. These degrading expressions are used pejoratively because deep within the unconscious Western, white, albino, psyche, their rejected, mutant status is viewed pejoratively, in a world where the human norm is to have hue. Greater insight into the sense of alienation in Western culture is provided by the use of the word mammy when whites refer to a black female caretaker, while referring to the white female caretaker as nanny. Clearly, nanny is something less than mammy. Also, the words uncle and auntie, used by whites towards blacks, bespeak an unconscious awareness of a deep and ancient familial relationship. The disrupted relationship is the origin of alienation, as supported by the symbolic rituals of Western fraternal organizations, such as the Masons and the Greek fraternities and sororities. The acting out of the crossing of the burning sands gives reference to the albino mutants' expulsion from Africa, across the burning sands of the Sahara Desert, out of Africa and into Europe. This was the original alienation experience of the albino whites first spawned in Africa. From a more recent literary work than the Bible, the famous 19th century novelist Herman Melville, in his profoundly symbolic work about the white supremacy system/culture, Moby L. Ick, states, "What is it that in the albino man so peculiarly repels and often shocks the eye, as that sometimes he is loathed by his own kith and kin? It is that whiteness which invests him, a thing expressed by th bear th alb. He name e. S. Emois as well made as other men has no substantive dephone we and yet th mere aspect of all-pervading whiteness makes him more strangely hideous than the ugliest abortion. Why should this be so?" Another famous American author, Mark Twain, in a collection of articles entitled Mark Twain on the Damned Human Race compliments Melville's SSMNT in his essay, Skin Deep. Twain's analysis suggests the depth of alienation experienced by whiles, albinos. The all black and brown skins are beautiful, but a beautiful white skis rare. How rare, one may learn by walking down a street in Paris, New York or London on a weekday, particularly in unfashionable street, and keeping count of thf. I.e. Satless actory camp excellence encountered in the course of a mile IRRDK camp excellence are masked, they make the whites look bleached out unwholesome, and sometimes frankly ghastly. I could notice this a boy, DWN Alf in the slavery days before the war. The splendid black satin SKM of the South African Zulus of Durban seemed to me to come very close to perfection. I can see those Zulus yet handsome and intensely black creatures, were notoriously clothed in loose summer stuffs whose snowy whiteness made the black all the blk by contrast. Keeping that group in my mind I can one bear that EROCMPX, ONS. WLTH the white ones which are streaming past this London down. Twain continues, detailing the negative attributes of white skin. The advmdej IWTH the Ulu, I think. He starts with a beautiful complexion and LTWLL. Last. Hun through. And as for the Indian, brown. Fin, smooth, blamwungeless, pleasant and restful to the eye afraid f. 0 Oler, harmonizing with all colors, and adding grace to fumal dash. NK there underscore is no sort of chance for the average white complexion agamst that ensage in perfect tint. Italy, major documentation in Western literary symbolism that explains the origin of the global white collective's alienation, and awareness of this fact, is the stark symbolism of the prolterotal important work of Edgar Rice Burroughs, the author of the Tarzan series. The first of this series, Tarzan of the Apes, was copyrighted in 1912 and published in 1914. Before Burroughs died in 1950, he had produced 26 Tarzan books. So significant is the Tarzan symbolism for Western civilization and culture that Burroughs Company remains a multi-million-dollar industry worldwide. Edgar Rice Burroughs is one of the largest-selling authors in the world. In 197.5, his company estimated that more than 150 million copies of his books had been printed in 50 languages around the world.